Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Divine and in today's tutorial I'll be showing us how to draft and sew this revered collared shirt with bias taping around the edges, as we can see. So firstly, I'm going to be drafting out my back block first, and I'll be coming down by 2 inches from the top of my pattern paper. Then from the side also, I'll be going in with 2 inches. So I'm just drawing like a border line before I start putting in my measurement. So now I'm going to be marking out my chest line measurements, which is my bust divided by 4 minus 1.75. And then I'm going to be marking my half length measurement of 16 inches. Next I'll be marking out my hip line of 8 inches, then my blouse full length of 31 inches. So I'm going to mark out this point again, then rule out a straight line. So next I'm going to be marking out my shoulder measurement divided by 2 plus 1 inch for ease, as it's a big shirt. So I'll be marking out my shoulder measurement on my shoulder line and on my chest line also. After which I'll mark my bust measurement divided by 4 on my chest line plus 2 inches for ease. Now on my half length I'll be going in by 0.75 on that side, so I can eliminate any excess at that point, and I'll be connecting it to my neckline. Then I'll come down with about 5 inches and blend it out from my half length. After which I'll be marking my waist measurement divided by 4 plus 2 inches for ease. So this 2 inches is optional, you can add more than that or less than that. Then I'll mark my hip measurement divided by 4 plus 2 inches also. And whatever I have on my hip, I'll be marking the same on my blouse full length. Then I'll connect all the points together. I'll blend out any harsh line we have there. Now I'm going to be marking my neckline of 3 inches, and from that 3 inches point I'll be going up with 1 inch. I'll connect that 1 inch point now to my shoulder armhole line. Then I'll be coming down by 1 inch for my neck depth, as you can see here. Now to get my armhole curve, I'll divide what I have on my shoulder by 2, on my armhole line by 2, then connect my bust measurement to the mid point on the armhole line. Now on the hemline of my blouse, I'll be going up by 12 inches. So I want the hem of my blouse to be open at that point, then I'll be going in with 1.5 inches. So I can have like an opening, like a slit, a see-through slit at the back of my blouse. So I'll be cutting off this part, I'll cut it out. So I'll be having an opening at the back of my shirt. So I'm going to measure what I have on my neck line there and take note of it. I'll make sure I measure it accurately, because I'm going to be needing this measurement for my front block. So I'm having 3.5. I'm going to mark it out. I will need this for my front block. So for my front block now, I'll be coming down with 5 inches or 6 inches from the top of my pattern paper. Then from the side also, I'll be going in with 5 to 6 inches. I'll be going in with 5 inches from the side, and I came down with 6 inches from the top. So now I'll be marking out my measurements. I'll mark out my chest line measurement, my bust divided by 4 minus 1.75 is the chest line. Then I'll mark my length to under bust of 13 inches, my half length of 16 inches, my hip line of 25 inches, and my blouse full length. So I'm going to be adding extra paper at the down so I can get my full blouse length. I'll draw out the straight line, then I'll mark my shoulder measurement, which is 8 plus 1 inch. I'll mark that also on my chest line, then I'll connect the points together. So next I'm going to be marking out my bust measurement now, divided by 4 plus 2 inches for ease. So this is my chest line, this is my apex, this is my length under bust, my half length, my hip, then my blouse full length, which I'll be adding to it. Then my waist measurement now, divided by 2 plus 2 inches, divided by 4 plus 2 inches for ease. Then my hip divided by 4 plus 2 inches for ease. And whatever I have on my hip, I'll measure, marking out the same on my blouse full length. So now I'm going to be getting my armhole curve. I'll be coming down by 1 inch to get my shoulder slope. Then divide what I have left by 2. Then go in by ½ inch on that point. So I'm going to be connecting all the points like so. Then for my neck width, I'll be going in by 3½ inches. So I marked 3 inches here, but later changed it to 3½ inches because I didn't want the shoulder to be too tight. So I'm connecting this now to my shoulder slope. So I did a shoulder width of 3 inches here and a depth of 3 inches here, which I later changed. I'll be explaining that as we go on. Then I want my neckline depth, the depth of the V, to be 9 inches. So I came down by 9 inches, and from that 9 inches point I will come out with 1 inch, which is for my button extension. So I'm going to mark that 1 inch all the way to the hem of my blouse, and the 1 inch point is starting from 9 inches where I want the V shape of my shirt to stop. So now my neckline, I'll be extending out, I'll be drawing out a straight line from that point, and you can see the line is not straight. I'm just like following the curve of the neck line I have there. So at this point I decided to change the 3 inches to 3½ inches. So I'm just going to redraw the shape, then I'm just going to draw out a straight line. So the line is not straight, you can see it's flowing with the curve I have for my neck measurement. Then this is where I'm going to be inserting my back measurement of 3.5, as you can see. Then I'll go out with 0.5 inches from that 3.5. Now I'm going to be using a curved side to connect that 0.5 inches to my shoulder line. Then I'm going to, you can see this part now, I'm not going to be using a straight line. I'll curve out my pattern curve, my pattern ruler, and draw out a straight line. Then I'm going to be using 3.5 inches for my collar. Then for my lapel now, I'm going to be going out with 2.5 inches. So I used 2 inches here, but I later changed it to 2.5 inches. So you can use 2 inches for this, you can use 2.5, you can use 3 inches. So I used 2 inches here, and I connected it back to my button extension. So I'm just going to curve out that sharp edge like so. Then from that 2 inches point, I'm going to go up with 0.5 inches for the notched collar, there. Then I'm going to go in with 1.5 inches. So I'll be connecting my collar now to that 0.5 inches I went up with, as you can see. Then I'll be connecting those points together. I'll be connecting the end of the collar now to the 1.5 inches I marked on the lapel. So this is it, guys. So at this point I'm going to be extending it, but I feel like it's small, so I'll be working with 2.5 inches. I'm connecting that 2.5 inches now to the button extension. I'm going to erase what I did previously. And I'm going to curve it. I don't want to have a sharp point there. So from that 2.5 inches now, I'll be going up with 0.5 inches. Like so. Then I'll be connecting the top of my collar to that 0.5 inches. So I'll erase the previous one we've done. Then I'm going to mark out my 1.5 inches again for my notched collar. So from the end of my 2.5, I'll be going in with 1.5. So I'll be connecting it like so. So this is the opening we have on our collar. So the opening you see on our notched collar, this is how we achieve it. Then I'll also be curving this part of our collar. So this is what we have. I'll just be erasing the lines we're not making use of. Okay, so this is what we have. Next I'll be adding my sewing allowance on the sides of my pattern. I'll be adding 1 inch by the side and ½ inch on the armhole side, and I've also added ½ inch on the lower part of our blouse. So I'm going to cut out, and please watch carefully how I cut out my pattern at this point. So I'm also going to take note of the part I notched. So this part here, we have to take note of it. So when cutting it on our fabric, we have to make a notch. And this part of our collar is going to be on fold. The part I marked with the arrow is going to be on fold. For my back also, I've gone ahead to add my seam allowance all round. ½ inch all round with 1 inch by the side. I'll cut out, after which I'm going to be cutting out these patterns on my fabric, and I've done that here. So I'll be placing the front on the back piece, the front piece on the back piece, making sure the right sides are facing each other. And I'm going to sew the sides using the 1 inch sewing allowance I added on my pattern. So I've done that now, and this is what we have. Next, this is the bias tape I'll be working with, and I'm going to open up my bias tape. I'll open up my bias tape until it's 1 inch, then I'll be folding that 1 inch into 2. So I'm going to iron it out. So after doing that, this is what I have. My bias tape is now ½ inch and it's folded into 2, not 3. So now to tape our blouse with our bias tape, I'll be starting from where I notched on my fabric, but I'll make sure the bias tape passes that point with about ½ inch. So I'm going to be placing the side that is on fold will be facing down, while the side that is open will be facing up. The two sides of my bias will be facing up, and I'll be placing my bias 0.25 inches below the edge of my fabric. That is, I won't be placing my black bias tape exactly on the tip of my fabric. I'm going to bring it down to 0.25 inches below my fabric. So I'm going to have like 0.25 inches, then my bias tape with the two mouths. So the mouth that is open will be what will be close to the 0.25. Then the part that is unfold will be facing down, while the part that is not unfold will be facing the tip or the edge of my fabric. So I'm going to pin this carefully, and I'm going to pin it all the way. So we have to pin this first before sewing. Then I'm going to be sewing on my bias with 0.25. So initially my bias is 0.5 inches now. I'm going to be sewing on the middle of my bias. So if I sew on the middle of my bias, the 0.25 on my fabric plus the 0.25 on my bias, that is 0.5 altogether. So that is the seam allowance I added to my fabric. So I'll be sewing in the middle of my bias taping. Now I want to cut out a facing for my front blouse. So it's this facing we'll be using to turn our front blouse. So I'm going to divide my shoulder by 2, then connect it like so. You can randomly mark how you want your facing to be. Then I'm going to trace out what I've marked. So this is how I'm tracing it out. So after tracing it out, I'm going to use my pencil to follow the dotted lines. Then I'm going to cut out, and this is what I have. And I've gone ahead to cut it on my fabric. I added my sewing allowance all round of 1/2 inch. Then I ironed stay on the 2-piece. So after sewing my bias taping now on my fabric, I'm going to be closing it up with my facing, and I'll place it right side facing each other. I'm going to arrange my facing properly, then pin also. I'm going to pin it, after which I'm going to turn it the other way. Then I'll take it to my machine and sew exactly on the line I used to sew my bias. So I'm not going to sew another line. The line I have on my fabric where I sewed my bias, I'm going to be sewing on top of that same line. So if you sew before that line or after that line, you're going to be having issues. So I sew exactly on the line I used to sew my bias, and towards the end of my facing there, I'm going to stop 1 inch to the end. So I'll sew it all the way to the down, but stop 1 inch to the end. And this is what I have after turning it out for the both sides of my blouse. You can see what we have, and I didn't sew it all the way to the end there. I left 1 inch. So I'm going to also be cutting out a facing for my back, my center back. So I just marked any point and draw out a straight line. I'm also going to trace out this line, trace out this part. So I already added sewing allowance on this pattern, so I won't have to add it again on my fabric. So I'm just going to cut out exactly what I have, then iron stay on the 2 pieces. I'll iron stay on it, then I'm going to be turning it the same way I did the front pattern. I'll place it right side facing the right side. Then I'm going to pin the facing to the fabric. Then I'll take it to my machine and sew exactly on the line I sewed my bias. Then towards the end, I'll leave 1 inch. So I'll sew it all the way to the hem, then leave 1 inch before the end. And this is what we have. I've done that for the both sides of my blouse. Now I'm going to be pinning the neckline in place. That is the facing and the main fabric, so that they become one. I'll just pin it. I'll take it to my machine and close it close it together using loose stitches. I'll do the same for the back. I'll sew on it so that everything stays in place. After doing that, I'll closing up the shoulder now. So I'll turn it right side facing each other. So I'm going to sew it using 1/2 inch. So at this point, after sewing it with 1/2 inch, I had to like loosen it a bit, because the facing, before I sew my facing, I'm supposed to push the facing in with about 1/2 inch. So we don't want the edge, the rough edge of our facing to be obvious or to be showing. So I'm going to, before sewing there, I'm going to fold my facing in. So I'm going to loosen that part a bit with about 1/2 inch. Then I'll fold that part in before sewing on my shoulder. As you can see, I'm folding it in, and I'm going to be using my hemming gum to seal up my facing with my main fabric and iron it in place. So for my collar now, I've cut out 2 pieces of fabric. I'm going to be ironing my hair stay on them. Then I'll fold it like so. Then the part that is on fold, as you can see, we have to make sure it's also on fold on the fabric we cut. Then I'm going to pin it down. After which, I'll be adding my seam allowance of 1/2 inch all round. And then I'm going to be, and the part I notched, I'm going to be marking it out so it's obvious. I'm going to be cutting out 2 pieces of this, one for my lining and one for my main collar. So I've cut it out. I'm going to notch. Let's not forget to notch. Then I'm going to label the neck side. So this is the side that is going to be sitting on our neckline. So if that part is sitting on our neckline, it means we'll be closing the other parts before we turn it. So this is the part we're going to be sewing close. Now before then, I'm going to be attaching our bias taping to this part also. And from the part we notched, our bias tape is going to come out with about 1/2 inch before that point. So we're placing our bias tape 0.25 inches below the edge of our fabric. So we're going to leave a space of 0.25 before we place our bias tape. We're going to pin that carefully all the way. We'll pin that carefully all the way. Then after pinning, I'll take it to my machine now and sew on the middle of the bias taping. So I'll sew it carefully. I'll take it and I'm going to stop 1/2 inch after the part I notched. So this is what we have. I'll just fold the two together and notch so I can get the midpoint. I'll do the same for the lining piece. I'll notch, then I'm going to pin it like so. I'm going to be pinning the lining to the main collar. I'll pin it neatly, then I'll turn it the other way and sew exactly on the line I used to sew my bias. So exactly on that line I'm going to be sewing on it, and after doing that I'll be turning out my collar. And this is what we have. So this is it. Now for the blouse, this is how my blouse came out. I'm going to be joining the back together. So this part now, I'm going to be lapping it on top so that the two Ankara fabrics are touching. So the black is going to be lapping on top of the Ankara so that the two Ankara are touching. I'm going to pin it down carefully. I'll pin it down, then 12 inches to the end of my fabric. I'm going to stop sewing there. I'll make a mark on that point. Then I'll take it to my machine and sew exactly in between the black and the Ankara, in between the black bias and the Ankara. I'll sew on that tip there, on that middle. So, and this is what we have. After doing that, this is how our back is looking too. Now I'm going to be sewing in my collar, and I'll be doing this how we usually sew our band. So I'm going to be sewing from the front, that is the right side of my blouse. Will be facing the right side of my collar. Then I'm going to pin it. I'll pin it all the way, and I'll be very careful at the end there. Then I'm going to sew using 1/2 inch, and this is what we have. Then I'll turn it the other way now and fold in the allowance there and pin it also. So this is how we sew our band for our skirt or our pants, so we can have a neat finishing. So I'll be folding in the allowance there and pin it. I'll do that all the way. I have to pin this down. I can't do this without pinning. Then I'll turn my collar the other way and sew in between. I'll sew in between this joining here. I'll sew in that line there, so that we have like an invisible finishing. So after doing that, now this is what we have. Our collar came out neat. So this part was a little bit tricky, so we have to be very careful when sewing that part. So now for our pocket, I've cut out 2 pieces with width of 6.5 inches, and the smaller piece length is 4 inches, while the bigger piece length is 6.5 inches also. So I'm going to be sewing my bias tape on it now, and like I've explained earlier, we'll be coming down by 0.25 inches from the top of our fabric. Then I'm going to pin my bias tape, making sure the part that is not on fold is facing the 0.25 inches. So I've done that now. Now I'm going to be placing the smaller piece on top. I'll turn it the other way and sew using 0.5 inches. That is exactly on that line where I sewed my bias. Then I'm going to be marking out 1.5 inches from my sewing line upwards. I'll mark 1.5 inches. Then I'm going to be folding it the opposite way like this. Then I'll sew using 0.25 at the edge. So I'm not going to sew this all the way. I'll sew it and make sure I stop about 0.75 inches to the end of the fabric on the other side. So I'll sew, then leaving about 0.75 at the other side. And this is what I have. You can see I didn't sew it all the way. So I'm going to turn out my pocket. I'll turn out my pocket, then I'll be pushing in my allowance, then fold in the allowance at the top also. So I'm going to be sewing this part like a band, like how we did our collar. I'll fold it in and pin, then take it to my machine and sew in between the fabric and the bias. like the way we sewed our collar. I'll turn it over and sew in between the fabric and the bias. So I've sewn it now. Then for my remaining allowance here, I can either iron it down, or as I'm sewing, I'll carefully push it in. I'm going to do that for the both pockets. Then this is my blouse here. I'm going to be attaching my pocket now. So from the shoulder, I'll be marking 17 inches. That is 1 inch below my half length. Is where my pocket will be starting. I'll mark out my pocket. Then from the center front, I'll be marking out 3 inches away from the center front. Then I'll place my pocket on that mark. I'll place it, then pin it down. I'll pin it down. After which I'll take it to my machine and sew on the edge. And I'll do that for the other side. Now for my sleeve, I'll be folding my fabric into 4. And I'll be drawing out my armhole curve. Then I'm going to be marking out my armhole measurement of 10 inches plus 1 inch for sewing allowance. Then I'm going to be working with a sleeve length. I'll be cutting my sleeve into 2. I'll be working with 9.5 inches for this first sleeve. Then the second sleeve will be 4 inches. So I'm going to mark out my width of my armhole. The width of my round sleeve. Then I'll cut it out. This is what I have. Then I'll be marking out another 4 inches. So I'll be attaching this to my sleeve. And I'll be doing it the same way I cut out my pocket. So I'm going to notch the midpoint. Then I'll get my bias tape now and place it 0.25 inches away from the edge of my fabric, then sew it. Then I've gone ahead to use the other 4 inches piece of fabric to turn it. Then I'm marking 1.5 inches from below the joining point, like I did for my pocket. I'll fold it in, then fold in 0.25 inches, which I'm going to pin down. After which I'll be sewing from the front. So this is the same way I fixed my pocket. I'll pin it down. Then sew in between the fabric and the bias, the line in between the fabric and bias. After which I'm going to be closing the sides with 1 inch. So I'll measure my armhole, which is 10. Then I'll measure my round sleeve of 16 inches. And I'll mark it out. So I'm going to sew on that point, then fix my sleeves to my blouse. Then lastly, I'm going to be completing the hem of my blouse. I've cut out a strip of fabric of 1 inch. I'm going to be sewing the edge of that 1 inch now to the facing of my blouse. You can see I'm going to be sewing it down. So I'm going to pin it first. After sewing it down that way, I'm going to fold my blouse this way, then use the taping to sew like a bias to sew all the way on the edge till I get to the other facing of my blouse. Then I'll sew that edge also. After doing it that way, I'll turn it like so, then sew on the tip. So I'm doing this like how you use a bias to turn a hem of a dress. So our blouse came out so well, so beautiful. So thank you guys for watching, and if you have any question, please ask in the comment section. Bye for now.